Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are on video number 6. We are reading the Hypostasis of the Archons. In video 5, we left off where Eleleth, the Aeon, or the great angel known as sagacity, also known as discernment or understanding, comes to assist Noria away from the clutches of the rulers or the minions or archons that attempted to defile her and mislead her. Eleleth comes down because Noria cries up to the mother-father for assistance. And so Eleleth comes down and introduces herself as the great angel who stands in the presence of the Holy Spirit. And Eleleth shares with Noria that she has been sent to speak with her and save her from the grasp of the rulers, and that she will teach Noria of her roots. So this is where we go into the next section entitled The Revelation of Eleleth. Now here it reads, "Now, as for that angel, I cannot speak of his power." Here we are referring to one of the lights that stood before the Christ in the pleroma, and that is the Aeon known as Eleleth. His appearance is like fine gold, and his raiment is like snow. This writer is Noria, and Noria speaks about what she witnessed during this visitation. From her standpoint, she provided analogies to Eleleth's appearance being as fine gold. So this means appearance of richness, and in Hebrew mythology, gold is equated to the understanding of purity and having been tested, having come through the test as pure gold. And his raiment is like snow, and also snow representing purity. But the difference here being gold is tried, and it's a trueness of heart, and snow is trueness of intention. "No, truly, my mouth cannot bear to speak of his power and the appearance of his face." So it does seem, from what we can gather, that this particular angel or Aeon is so incredibly awe-inspiring that it's even difficult to really describe it. Eleleth, the great angel, spoke to me, quote, "It is I," unquote, he said, quote, "who am understanding." So just as Sophia is the Aeon of wisdom, Eleleth is the Aeon of discernment and understanding. I am one of the 4 luminaries who stand in the presence of the great invisible spirit. We talked about this in the secret book of John when we listed the 4 luminaries or lights that stood before the Archons or the Holy Spirit, Christ and Sophia. And those angels or Aeons stood with Christ in order to bring about the Father's will through Christ, who would do the work, to bring word into flesh, or to be manifestation of God's will in action. It says, "Do you think these rulers have any power over you?" Now, what you want to keep in mind as you're reading this, Eleleth is not only speaking to Noria. Eleleth is giving to Noria information that Noria will carry on with her. As it said in one of our earlier videos in the previous section, Eve had said when she was pregnant with Noria, "God has produced for me a virgin as an assistance for many generations of human beings." So Eleleth is not sharing this information solely for Noria. It is that Noria would take this information and write it down in this book that she is putting together, which today we know is the Hypostasis of the Archons, so that we may understand this message is for everyone that is a son and daughter of God, who has the gnosis and the wisdom to receive this insight, this truth that Eleleth is sharing. Eleleth asks you, do you think these rulers, these archons, have any power over you? One of our listeners had pointed out that when we have tribulations, when we have things that we might do, when we're driven by envy, driven by anger, driven by covetousness, so forth and so on, it's easy for us to blame the demiurge. But in fact, who is really creating here? Definitely the demiurge is responsible for this realm that's called the tree of good and evil. However, we are accountable for coming here into the flesh form, and each opportunity that we have before us is an opportunity to partake of, divide and conquer division, which is also known as evil, deception, and lies, or to take on goodness or truth. So this is in fact the case. The rulers have no true power over you. So this is not a rhetorical question. This is a question that is inspiring in Noria to consider a truth. Do you think these rulers have any power over you? None of them can prevail against the root of truth. You see, we are all from truth. Truth is in us, the truth of what Christ shared when he brought his ministry here to this realm. And wisdom lives through her progeny into this realm, also known as Zoe, and we're going to be introduced to this progeny, Zoe, in this video. As we continue to read, Eleleth says to Noria, none of them can prevail against the root of truth, for on its account he has appeared in the final ages. So here it's saying that we have existed much, much longer than the demiurge, and that as long as this universe seems to be, based on what we know from science or what we understand about science, this universe is presumably billions of years old, it still is the final age. You see, it says, for on its account, he has appeared in the final ages. And who is it here? It is the root of truth, meaning the Christ, the Sophia. For on its account, he has appeared. He, meaning the demiurge and its minions, has appeared in the final ages. And these authorities will be restrained. You see, this is how infinitely arcane you are and sage you are. You are filled with the truth that expounds, expands, emanates beyond even the physical realm. This is the level of power that you have. But power is not about restraint or forcing or pushing or warring against or overcoming something. True power has no restraints. It simply is. And this is what Eleleth is sharing with Noria, that she is from the root of all power and all truth. That is even before, much, much further before the appearance of the Archons, the rulers, who really are ignorant. They're like babies or little blind children who have no real experience compared to Noria and the children of God. And these authorities cannot defile you and that race, for your abode is in incorruptibility. So who is this race? Well, the race is the pneumatic race. It is all those who have found the truth, the good news of what Christ shared with us, and we live through the wisdom of Sophia in what's called life, also known as Sophia. So there is Sophia Pistis, which is the faith of wisdom, wisdom faith, and then we have Sophia, Zoe Sophia, which is life wisdom that we get from physical life, living in the realm of the Kanoma, the realm of good and evil. We are given the substance of things that will become, the evidence of things that are yet to happen. This is what faith is. It is the pronoia already within you, the name that is growing forth from you. It is the seed in you that has germinated for all time in the past and is blossoming forward. This is pistis in action. For this knowledge, this gnosis resides in you. This wisdom is an outgrowth of the gnosis that is freeing you from the shackles and the disease and the death that surrounds us. But it does so through the vehicle known as Zoe, which is the offspring of Sophia. And we're going to get to that here in a second. And these authorities cannot defile you. In other words, there's nothing they can do to take away your fullness, which is the pleroma within you. You have no need to worry or stress or no fear that they may overcome you in some way. You see, they have no capacity, for you are far more wise than they are. Now, don't feel sorry for the Archons and the demiurge. They too have their own purpose and path. They are aeons that have come here to fulfill, just as Judas did with Christ and Peter did with Christ, the outcome of all that is as intended from the beginning, the perfect tapestry that is unfolding. And it says, where the Virgin Spirit lives, and that Virgin Spirit lives within you, who is superior to the authorities of chaos and to this universe. So not only superior to the demiurge and the aeons, but also even this physical realm, the universe. In fact, this universe is a projection of thought that we all share, the common collective conscious that we all share. And so Noria says, but I said, sir, teach me about these authorities. So she wants to know, who are these authorities? She no longer really feels threatened. You see, remember earlier I said Eleleth is the aeon that comes to bring peace through understanding and discernment. You see how she does this? He does this by sharing about our true nature of power, our true power. And this calms Noria. And now she sees the authorities, the rulers, for what they are. They are like children in play, and she's no longer threatened. So she becomes curious. Sir, teach me about these authorities. How did they come into being? By what genesis? And out of what material? And who created them and their power? Now we know the answer to a lot of these questions, but from Noria's perspective, of course, she doesn't have the Gnostic text. We're fortunate in this age, Nag Hammadi library, and being on the other side of the Christ and entering into the Sophia, the age of the Sophia, which is the age of Aquarius. We are very fortunate to live in this time. But for Noria, this was new, and so she wants to know about these rulers. How did they come about? The great angel Eleleth, understanding, spoke to me. Incorruptibility inhabits limitless realms. So incorruptibility essentially means the thing that cannot be destroyed. It cannot be tainted, it cannot be diluted, it cannot be persuaded or misled, for it's incorruptible. You also can see similar words as incorrigible and even corporal beings or incorporeal beings. This is eternal, incorruptible, cannot be penetrated, and it inhabits infinity. This is the first thing that Eleleth lays out. So Noria gets a foundational understanding. Sophia, who is called pistis meaning faith, wanted to create something. Now recall in earlier Gnostic texts that we have read and commented on this channel, we talked about how Sophia brought about the anomaly known as this realm called the Gnoma by rushing to embrace the entirety of God. She wanted to embrace God. For wisdom is love and knowledge together. Where we get the word philosophia means the love of wisdom. Sophia loved the emanation, the monad, the mother father so much, she wanted to embrace it, take it in. But in so doing, this wasn't from any malice, but from a lack of understanding. For wisdom can only come about through experience. So she was to gain that experience. But to do so, she had to have faith. She had the faith that what she was to do by embracing the mother, she would not be rejected. And so it is. She was not rejected. In fact, it was herself. She took it upon herself to take on shame and guilt and to go out of her way to redeem what she had set forth. So she wanted to create something. This would be the first aeon outside of the mother father that would go about to create or emanate. She wanted to do this alone without her partner, which in this case would be the Christ. And what she created was celestial. Now, why did she want to do this on her own and not with her partner, the Christ? Remember that when the Christ was brought about by the mother father, all the different lights stood before the Christ. And one of those, the very last one, was Sophia. She was the one that was on the perimeter. She could take in everything. She could see everything from the perimeter. Imagine if you're further inside a circle, you're less likely to be able to take in the full picture. Sophia was able to take in the full picture. So she was on the outer realm, if you will. And the emanation was expanding. So she had no choice. She was part of that expansion, and it would be through her that expansion would take place. Christ, on the other hand, was further in. He was closer to the mother father. Now we're doing this all metaphorically. This is not actually physically logistical in any way, or geographical or topographical in any way. This is all metaphorical. So the Christ was further in. So the Sophia was in a position whereby she would need to expand herself. The Christ, on the other hand, was intending to bring grace, was intending to bring an understanding of gnosis and understanding and truth. This was this aeon of gnosis and truth. This could only be had through the Sophia. So Sophia had to set forth first what Christ would then come back to redeem with the Sophia. So this is how it worked. And so faith is the substance of things unseen. So she was on the outer realm. On the outer realm is what's called the shadow. This part of existence is simply, you could think of it as being the different tools, the different ingredients to recipe just simply lying on the counter. It has no shape or form. There is no recipe. There merely are different ingredients lying on a table. This is the shadow. This is potential, you see. And Sophia goes into this potential. She's on the outer realm. She's the last aeon that stood before the Christ. And so, this is what she does. She creates what's called celestial. And this is the first introduction of what's known as what's heavenly. Not pleromic, or meaning of the pleroma, but not the fullness. Heaven is not the fullness. Heaven is a state of being above the material, but not exactly the material, but also not the spiritual. The pleroma, it's known as the celestial. It is above the earth, or above the material substance. What she created was that realm called the celestial. So it was an amalgamation of sorts of the fullness and that which was not, which is the illusion, for it really was not. And this was brought forth out of the shadow, that realm called the shadow. And there was a veil between that realm. It was a shadow, you see. So this is all metaphorical. This is the way we can only understand it, because there is that veil between the pleroma and everything else. Is beyond the pleroma is a shadow, and that shadow is a veil. Eleleth continues and says, a veil exists between the world above and the realms below, and shadow came into being beneath the veil. This is where things begin to move. The shadow came about when Sophia's desire to create the celestial, it moved that veil. And imagine, if you will, complete pitch blackness moving about. It would be as a shadow moving around. And that shadow was projected apart. So it was projected apart from everything else. And what she had created came to be in matter, like an aborted fetus. Now, this word matter, we also get other words stemming from Ma, M-A, like mirage, mother. And Sophia is the mother of living, her progeny, which is Zoe. But because it was part pleroma and part the illusion, it was like an aborted fetus. It assumed a shape molded out of shadow and became an arrogant beast resembling a lion. And lion, we think of in astrology, lion representing the king of the jungle, the dynamic one, the dramatic one, the one with the large ego, but also creative and needing attention. Now, these are, of course, the worst attributes of the lion or the Leo. At the same time, it's the giver of life, you see. And this is where we have the sun is the energy, that fire, that brings about the material realm. It was androgynous. And when we see the word androgynous, this is significant in that it says to you that it has the ability to create, because it has both the male and the female attributes. So when you see that, you can't think of an actual physical lion that happens to have male and female genitalia. This is a being that's of a spiritual nature or a soul nature. It's not like human beings. This is, again, meaning the capacity to create, because it has both male and female attributes, as in being able to project a will and to form that will, the male and the female, as have already said, because it derived from matter. Now, the difference here being that syzygistic pairs that we get in the pleroma are consorts. They are male and female, and they work together, but as a complementary pair, they are syzygies, or androgynistic pairs. But the lion takes on both, so he has no consort. So he has to create his consort, and so he goes about to create matter, and that becomes his consort, also known as the harlot or the whore, but we'll get to that in other videos. And so this matter comes about because of Sophia, and the demiurge, or that lion, is derived from that matter. Opening his eyes, he saw a vast quantity of endless matter, and he turned arrogant, saying, I am God, and there's no one but me. When he said this, he sinned against all. Again, in Gnosticism, when we talk about sin, we are saying an error in thinking. It isn't about your action or a law that you break or something like this. There are no laws that we've read about so far. You see, nothing in this book talks about any laws that Demiurge has broken. But when it says he sinned against all, it means that he presents himself as blind and ignorant. And so it goes on, it says, a voice came from above the realm of absolute power. And that realm is, of course, where the monad resides, saying, you are wrong, Samuel, that is, God of the blind. And so here again, it isn't that the mother father says, oh, you sinned, now I'm going to punish you, but rather brings gnosis to Samuel, with the hopes that he may understand. You see, he sinned, meaning he's blind. And he said, if any other thing exists before me, meaning before I was, let it become visible to me. He says this with great command. Immediately, Sophia pointed her finger and introduced light into matter, and she pursued it down to the region of chaos. Now, chaos actually is below the demiurge, or Samiel. It is a result of Samiel. It's Samiel's creation, because Samiel brings about chaos from his blindness. Imagine someone who's blind and is trying to find their keys in the dark and groping around, and then they've got all the stuff on the nightstand, and it's just spilling all over the floor, and the lamp falls down, and this is essentially what is happening here with Samiel. He's disoriented. He's amidst all of this matter, and he's trying to make sense of it. So he proclaims, I am God. And he says, and then Sophia returned up to her light, and once again darkness returned to matter. So here, Sophia gave Samuel an opportunity to witness the light from the pleroma. This ruler, by being androgynous, and again, it means that he's capable of creating because he has male and female attributes, made himself a vast realm, an endless precinct. See, he goes about and creates. He makes things. He doesn't emanate things. He makes things. He forms things. And occasionally you'll see the word create, but it mainly, if you read both in the canonical text and the Gnostic text, it usually will say words like he made, he created, he formed, but never does it say emanate. And he contemplated creating offspring for himself. You see, it's all in the mind. He merely contemplates it. He thinks it into being. And thus created 7 offspring, also having creative powers like its parent, androgynous like their parent. And he said to his offspring, I am the God of all. Now these 7 offspring in Greek mythology and through astral theology represent the 7 planets that come about from the sun being Samael. And we get this because if you look up at the sun, you lose your eyesight, you go blind. And then you have the 7 planets, which are the 7 planets of old Greek mythology. Now they made other gods, but they weren't certain these planets existed, but they certainly knew the 7 existed, up to Zeus, which was Jupiter. And he said to his offspring, I am the God of all. Zoe, the daughter of Pistis Sophia, shouted, saying to him, now this is Zoe's life. The meaning, in other words, life itself is telling you what Zoe's getting ready to say. Zoe, the daughter of Pistis Faith, shouted, saying to him, you are wrong, Sakla, for which the alternate name is Yaldabaoth. So she's saying that life itself will tell you that the demiurge, Samael, Yaldabaoth, is not the God of all. And this is through faith. Pistis Sophia, wisdom. Wisdom will show you this. She breathed into his face, and her breath became a fiery angel for her. And that angel bound Yaldabaoth and cast him down in Tartarus, at the bottom of the abyss. Now remember, Tartarus is that place where the angels who left the original state, and Peter talks about being chained in for the end of days, where there would be judgment. Tartarus is the lowest pit of chaos and hell. It's the lowest. It's reserved specifically for the Archons and the demons and so forth and so on. It's the bottom of the abyss. This Yaldabaoth gets cast down outside of the 7th heaven and below the 7th heaven. Now when his offspring Sabaoth saw the strength of that angel, now his offspring is Sabaoth, which is the god of hosts. And it's the angel of hosts, meaning it's the angel of organization and structure. And it has a balancing effect in the heavens. And we're going to see how this comes about. When he saw the strength of that angel, meaning Zoe, he repented. So he has a turn in thinking, and he comes to realize and condemned his father and his mother Matter. You see, earlier I was telling you that the consort to Yaldabaoth or Samael is Matter. He loathed her, but he sang songs of praise up to Sophia and her daughter Zoe. So he loathed this creation that his father had brought forth, called Matter. And Sophia and Zoe found him and put him in charge of the 7th heaven. So here is where Sophia and Zoe step in to ensure that humankind wouldn't have only the demiurge or Yaldabaoth ruling over us in this realm. You see, there are checks and balances even in this realm. Below the veil, between above and below. So this Archon, or this Aeon, Sabaoth, which is the son of Yaldabaoth, Samael, he is put in charge of the 7th heaven, which is below the veil. And he is called God of the forces, Sabaoth. So he has the charge to call angels. So here is where you can have guardian angels, and you can pray to say Sabaoth for your guardian angel. You can call to an angel to assist you in time of need. Sabaoth is keeping Yaldabaoth in check. Now, the demiurge is the combination of all of the aeons, but the head one is Yaldabaoth. That is the head one in terms of the physical creation of matter. But Sabaoth is the aeon of forces. He balances the material realm through physics, if you will. So you can consider him as the god of physics. He's the god that works to keep entropy and creation in check. This is the god of harmony. So he works alongside with Yaldabaoth, keeping him in check, since he is up above the forces of chaos. For Sophia placed him there. In fact, he is above Yaldabaoth. Even though the demiurge or Yaldabaoth is ruling over this realm, he's the god of the creative realm, the material realm. Sabaoth is above him and keeping him in check through the forces, or through physics, if you want to think of it that way scientifically. So this is what you have. This is pronoia in action. This is all set into place even before humanity is created, as Sophia has the wisdom to know what is going to transpire. So she sets this all up. And this was more simply said in Secret Book of John as she had created a throne, keep him busy and enraptured. This really is the same thing. Keeping the ego of Yaldabaoth in check. So he becomes the god of not just evil, but good and evil. Now, when these events had come to pass, he made himself a huge four-faced chariot of cherubim and harps and lyres and an infinity of angels to act as ministers. This is what we refer to as Sabaoth, as the God of hosts or Lord of hosts. And you'll see that in Jewish mysticism in the Old Testament. When Sabaoth is being brought up, it's being referred to as the Lord of forces or hosts. Essentially, God coming to in its power for light and for good. Sophia took her daughter Zoe and had her sit at his right to teach him about the things that exist in the eighth heaven. So you could think of Sabaoth as being an intern in training to return back to the pleroma. So he's the first one to step forward. And this is where I'm going to go out on the limb. This is just a conjecture on my behalf. We get the word Sabbath, and this is the return. So Sabaoth really is the first one, even before the Christ, to consider returning. So this is something that the progeny of Zoe, or progeny of Sophia, which is Zoe, life itself, is showing. You see, Gnosis is working, and wisdom is working through Sophia and Zoe. In other words, through faith and life, to teach about the nature of the forces, or to teach the forces of this realm, which is Sabaoth. That's Logos in action, the governance of everything, to show that there is something greater than this material realm, greater than the physical law or the laws of physics that is governing this realm. That is Sophia and Zoe. That is from the pleroma, showing Sabaoth this truth. Now when Yaldabaoth saw him in this great splendor and at his height, he envied him. And the envy became something androgynous. Again, it meaning that it set in him a desire to create. See, this is how it works in this realm. If you push -1 away, then +1 shows up somewhere else. And so for Yaldabaoth, this is what envy represents. It represents a mechanism that engenders inside of a person or a being the desire to create, to escape that envy. And this was the origin of envy. And envy engendered death. This is what envy always will lead to. It will lead to death. Now the reason, if you think about it, you think it through, why does envy lead to death? Because what you're essentially doing is you're hating yourself. So you really are committing suicide. You're essentially killing yourself because you praise or put above yourself something else because of your covetousness. So then envy naturally would engender death. And death engendered his offspring and gave each of them charge of its heaven. All of the heavens of chaos became full of their multitudes. And so this is where death is introduced. Death is introduced by Yaldabaoth because of his envy, his jealousy of his own son, Sabaoth. And this is a retelling of a archetypical story that we have throughout time. But it was by the will of the Father of all that they all came into being. So you see, the mother father in the pleroma allowed all of this to be, after the pattern of all the things above, so that the sum of chaos might be attained. So essentially what we have here is, in effect, the end result is that even beyond the pleroma, it would expand into all of infinity. But in the process, it would create chaos, but then it would also purify. Think of it as a flood that is coming. It wipes everything out as it's inundating and taking over some piece of geography or topography, and it creates chaos in its action as it's moving forward, and it just tears everything down, destroys everything in its path. But as it passes beyond, then all the water behind it cleanses everything out, purifies the land, takes it over. And this is what you have here being described. There, I have taught you about the pattern of the rulers and the matter in which it was made visible, along with their parents and their universe. And that's the end of this section. Essentially, you have an incredible telling of how the demiurge became the god of good and evil, and how death was introduced into this realm, how life was introduced into this realm, how the laws that govern this realm was introduced into this realm, and how Noria is the individual that wrote this down, and we are now able to read, as she shared this thousands of years ago. And thankfully, through the Nag Hammadi finding, they were saved in a jar in Egypt and found in 1945. So we're again very fortunate to be able to read this today. All right, with that, so thanks for listening, and we're going to finish this book in our next video under the section titled Epilogue. All right, thanks for listening, and talk to you again soon. Bye.